Think about the last meal you ate. Maybe it was a simple breakfast: eggs, toast, a drizzle of honey, a glass of orange juice. Or maybe it was a quick dinner: a Caesar salad, a sprinkle of Parmesan, a splash of olive oil. You probably didn't think twice about any of it. You trusted the label, you trusted the packaging, you trusted the store. But here's the thing: a significant portion of what Americans eat every single day is not what it claims to be, not even close. And this isn't some niche conspiracy theory. This is documented. This is verified. The FDA has acknowledged it. Scientists have tested for it. Investigative journalists have traced it. And the conclusion is always the same: the food industry has a deception problem, and most Americans are living inside it without ever knowing. Nothing about this is limited to junk food or ultra-processed snacks. These are foods you consider healthy, foods you consider premium, foods you pay more for because you believe you're getting something real. And in billions of cases every year, you're not. According to outside estimates reviewed by the FDA, food fraud affects roughly 1% of the global food industry at a cost of somewhere between $10 and $40 billion annually. That number sounds abstract until you realize what it actually means. The bottle of olive oil on your kitchen counter may not be olive oil. The honey in your cabinet may be mostly corn syrup. The fish you ordered at a restaurant last week may have been a completely different species. Every single day, Americans are eating fake food, and the scale of it is larger than most people are prepared to accept. Today, we're counting down 12 of the most common fake foods Americans consume regularly, the ones hiding in your grocery cart, in your pantry, on your plate. Some of these will surprise you. A few will frustrate you. And at least one of them is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about what you're actually eating. Number 12, cinnamon. Morning oatmeal. Holiday baking. A sprinkle over your latte. Cinnamon feels like the most American spice imaginable: warm, familiar, and completely unassuming. Most people assume cinnamon is just cinnamon. It isn't. Sold in the vast majority of American spice jars, what most consumers buy is not what's technically classified as true cinnamon. Real cinnamon, Ceylon cinnamon, comes from Sri Lanka and carries a delicate, slightly sweet flavor. What fills most shelves is cassia, a related but distinct bark from China and Indonesia that is cheaper to produce, sharper in flavor, and legally sold under the same name without any clear distinction on the label. Once ground into powder, cinnamon becomes an even easier target for adulteration. Investigations have found fillers mixed into powdered cinnamon materials that have no business being in a spice jar at all. FDA has flagged spice imports as one of the most fraud-prone categories entering the country, with nearly 12% of tested samples containing non-spice material. Paying for cinnamon is one thing, getting something else entirely and never knowing is another. Number 11, fruit juice. 100% juice. Fruit on the packaging. Maybe even no sugar added. So what's actually wrong here? Plenty, as it turns out. Pomegranate, blueberry, cranberry, cherry. These premium labeled juices are among the most routinely adulterated beverages in the country. Expensive, flavorful fruit is diluted with enormous volumes of cheaper apple or grape juice, sometimes to the point where the named fruit is barely present at all. The color holds, the flavor gets approximated, and the consumer pays a premium price for something delivering a fraction of the nutritional value they expected. Pick up a bottle for its pomegranate antioxidants, and what you're drinking may be mostly apple juice with red coloring. The label hasn't technically lied. The spirit of it, though, has been broken entirely. Number 10, Parmesan cheese. 2 versions of Parmesan exist in your grocery store. One is made the traditional way, aged for months, with complex flavor and genuine craftsmanship. The other sits in a green shaker can or a pre-grated plastic bag, and it may contain ingredients you would not expect. Cellulosa filler derived from wood pulp has been found in pre-grated Parmesan sold across the United States. Used to prevent clumping and extend volume, it appears because the name Parmesan is largely unregulated outside of Europe. That gap allows the label to be applied to products made from cheaper cheeses with almost no resemblance to the authentic product. One investigation uncovered items marketed as 100% Parmesan that contained no Parmesan at all. Next time you shake that powder over your pasta, what lands on your plate may be a blend of lesser cheeses, fillers, and additives sold as something it fundamentally is not. Number 9. Coffee. Over 150 million Americans reach for coffee first thing in the morning before they've said a word to anyone. Few daily rituals feel more personal, which is exactly why this one is difficult to accept. Ground coffee is one of the easier products in the American food supply to adulterate. Once the beans are roasted and milled, the finished product becomes nearly impossible to authenticate without laboratory equipment. Studies have found fillers including roasted corn, chicory, and soybean meal blended into lower-priced and imported products to extend weight and volume. Harder to detect than most food fraud, this variety persists precisely because these fillers mimic coffee's color and aroma closely enough that nothing seems off. You brew your cup, you taste something that functions like coffee, and you never question it. That is the whole design. Invisibility is the product. Number 8. Seafood. Well documented, widely reported, and still largely ignored seafood fraud sits at a scale that should unsettle anyone who eats fish regularly. Oceana, one of the country's leading ocean conservation organizations, tested over 1,200 seafood samples from restaurants, grocery stores, and suppliers across the United States. Their finding: 33% of samples were mislabeled according to IFTA guidelines. 1 in 3. Red snapper is among the most commonly swapped species replaced in tests with tilapia, rockfish, and other lower-value fish. White tuna has been found to be a scolar, a fish linked to digestive illness and banned for sale in several countries. Substitution happens at multiple points along the supply chain, at the distributor, at the restaurant, even behind the grocery counter. Once a fish is filleted, most consumers have no practical way to identify what species they're actually looking at. You ordered salmon. Somewhere between the ocean and your plate, that may have changed. Number 7. Honey. Few foods feel more natural than honey. Ancient, unprocessed, made by bees from flowers. The idea that anyone would fake it seems almost absurd until you look at the numbers. Food safety researchers testing grocery store honey samples found that a significant percentage contained little to no pollen, which is one of the primary biological markers confirming that honey is authentic and unprocessed. Documented by both the FDA and independent laboratories, adulteration with corn syrup, rice syrup, or cane sugar is a known and ongoing issue, particularly with imported honey from regions where oversight is weaker. Signals exist for those paying attention: a price that seems too low, a label with no country of origin, a texture thinner than genuine honey should be. Most shoppers never look. They see pure honey on the jar and trust it completely. Poured into their morning tea may be nothing more than a sweetener blend dressed up in amber coloring, carrying none of what they thought they were buying. Number 6. Maple syrup. Here is a product whose entire value rests on one thing: being real. Genuine maple syrup demands real labor. Tapping trees during a narrow seasonal window, collecting sap, boiling it down. It takes roughly 40 gallons of raw sap to produce a single gallon of finished syrup. That process shows up in the price, which is why authentic maple syrup sits at a dramatically different cost than the brown-tinted bottles crowding most grocery store shelves. Many of those cheaper bottles are not maple syrup at all. Flavored corn syrup with a leaf on the label, priced to move, bought by millions of Americans who never read the ingredients panel. Even among bottles explicitly marketed as pure maple syrup, international adulteration with cheaper sugar syrups has been documented by food regulators. The bottle looks right. The price feels like a smart buy. And that combination, looking legitimate while delivering something less, is precisely the mechanism that makes this fraud so durable. Number 5, olive oil. Possibly no food fraud in America is as thoroughly documented, as repeatedly exposed, and as consistently unaddressed as what happens inside most bottles of extra virgin olive oil. Researchers at the UC Davis Olive Center tested imported extra virgin olive oils sold in the United States and found that 69% failed to meet the standards for that classification, nearly 7 in 10 bottles. Extra virgin is the highest quality designation in olive oil, cold-pressed, low acidity, maximum flavor. What many of those bottles actually contained was refined oil blended with cheaper alternatives, sometimes with green coloring added to approximate the look of something freshly pressed. The EFTA has acknowledged this. Independent scientists have published on it for years. And yet the same bottles continue sitting on grocery store shelves. Italian flags, pastoral imagery, premium price tags delivering something far removed from what the label advertises. Decades of documentation have changed almost nothing. The fraud remains. Number 4, spices, especially turmeric and saffron. When federal inspectors examined spice shipments entering the United States, nearly 12% of tested samples were found to contain materials with no business being in a spice jar. Plant parts not intended for consumption. Insect fragments. And in some cases, hazardous industrial colorants. Turmeric is among the most targeted. The golden spice behind health supplements, curry dishes, and wellness trends has been found adulterated with lead chromate, a toxic pigment from industrial manufacturing, used to deepen the color and make the product appear more potent than it is. Saffron, which costs over $2,000 a pound due to the labor required to harvest it, has been found cut with flower petals, onion threads dyed orange, and materials entirely unrelated to the saffron plant. Paying for saffron and receiving dyed onion skin isn't just financial fraud. Depending on what was blended in, it's a health risk that most consumers never see coming. Number 3, organic produce. Few words in American retail carry more purchasing power than organic. Shoppers pay a meaningful premium, sometimes 30, 40, or 50% more, because they believe what's inside the sticker is true. Grown without synthetic pesticides, without chemical fertilizers, without the shortcuts of industrial agriculture. And that belief, more than anything else, is what makes the deception work. Mislabeled organic produce has been prosecuted and documented by American regulators as an ongoing problem in the food supply. Conventionally grown fruits and vegetables treated with pesticides, raised through standard agricultural methods, have been relabeled and sold at organic prices, with the difference in margin pocketed along the way. Visually, there is no difference. Without laboratory testing, no consumer at a grocery counter can verify the claim. And so the premium gets charged, the trust gets extended, and in documented cases, the certification was simply invented. You paid more because you believed you were getting something different. In a meaningful number of cases, you were not. Number 2, imitation crab. Most people already sense something is off here. What's worth understanding is how deep the gap actually goes. Surimi is the product behind nearly all crabs sold in American grocery stores, sushi restaurants, and pre-made seafood salads. Made primarily from pollock or other low-cost white fish, it is mixed with starch, egg whites, and artificial flavoring, then shaped, colored, and extruded to resemble crab meat. Labeled as imitation crab in some contexts, it gets presented as simply crab, or sometimes crab in countless dishes: rangoon, crab cakes, seafood pasta, party platters. No disclosure, no clarification. Just the word crab on a menu or a container, with a price that implies real shellfish and a product that contains none. The nutritional gap between real crab and processed surimi is significant. The price gap is even larger, and the average American encounters it multiple times a week without ever quite registering what they're eating. Number 1, ground beef. Nothing in the American food supply feels more elemental than this. Backyard grilling, Tuesday night dinner, school cafeteria lunch. Ground beef is the foundation of fast food, family recipes, and everyday cooking across the country. Familiar, trusted, assumed to be exactly what it says. And yet, grinding changes everything about meat's traceability. Once beef enters a grinder, its origin, composition, and fat content become nearly impossible to verify without laboratory analysis. Regulatory actions and independent investigations have documented the addition of lower-value meat fillers, organ material, and processed beef byproducts to ground beef, sold at standard prices. Mislabeling of fat content is a separate and documented problem. Packages marketed as lean ground beef have been tested and found to contain significantly higher fat percentages than their labels claim. Fat content affects both the price and the nutrition, and no consumer standing at a refrigerated grocery case has any way to confirm what the package is actually telling them. What the label says and what the scale and the lab would confirm are not always the same number. Ground beef, the most American food there is, and one of the most quietly misrepresented things in the entire grocery store. Pull all of this together, and one thing becomes clear. Food fraud is not the work of a few rogue actors operating in the shadows of an otherwise trustworthy system. It is the logical output of a food industry built on cost compression, the relentless pressure to produce cheaper food for a market that has been trained to expect lower prices at every turn. When margins are razor thin and competition is intense, the incentive to dilute, substitute, mislabel, and cut corners becomes overwhelming. And as long as the product looks right, tastes close enough, and passes a glance at checkout, the gap between what was promised and what was delivered stays invisible. Invisibility is the whole architecture of this problem. Designed to resemble the real thing, packaged to look legitimate, priced to feel like a deal. And so it moves through distribution centers, into grocery stores, across checkout lanes, and directly onto your plate day after day, meal after meal, without a single alarm going off. Larger, faster, and cheaper than at any point in its history, that is the American food supply in 2026. But cheaper has never meant the same thing as real. And the distance between what the label promises and what the product actually delivers is, in many documented cases. The next time you reach for the shelf without reading what's on it, leave your thoughts below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.